Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's Business First Wednesday, Legal Considerations for Starting a Small Business. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Melissa from the Business Insight Center at the Central Library of Rochester and Monroe County. Please remember to mute your microphones and any questions, input them into the chat. We will be answering questions periodically throughout the presentation. A recording of this presentation will be posted on our YouTube channel, and we will be emailing a copy of a link to the channel and a copy of the slides to registered participants. Just a reminder, all services of the Business Insight Center and Carlson Center for Intellectual Property are free and available by appointment only. And I'd like to introduce you to Tim Block from the Small Business Development Center.
Yes, thank you, Melissa. Tim Block here. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Good morning. It's 2/2/22. It's Groundhog Day. I'm not sure what all that means, but I hope everyone has a good day today. So I'm Tim Block. I'm a business advisor with the Small Business Development Center here in Rochester. I've been with SBDC for 3.5 years. There's about 22 SBDCs throughout the state. About half down by New York City. The other half are spread throughout New York State. There's SBDCs in all 50 states. We provide management and technical assistance to startup and existing small business firms throughout Monroe and surrounding counties. The best way to make an appointment with us is through our website, nysbdc.org. That's www.nysbdc.org, and click Make an Appointment in the upper right-hand corner. One of the most common early type questions we seem to receive from our clients is, should I do a DBA or should I do a LLC or a corporation? Very common question. It seems to be a pretty straightforward question, but not necessarily with a simple answer. There's just many factors to consider. So we're fortunate today to have as our speaker, John Lazenby, an attorney with many years experience helping small businesses. John has spoke to our group several times in the past, and I'm confident you'll find his presentation helpful and insightful. So John, take it away.
All right, very good, Tim. Melissa, thank you. And welcome all. I will be going through a presentation, and the materials I have are, quite frankly, going to be more than the hour and a half that we have here. So I'm going to go through, but by all means, as we're going along, if you have a question, submit it to Melissa. I'll take a moment periodically to see what Melissa has received, and hopefully we'll get your questions answered. But we're gonna simply dive in here, and let's see. Melissa, I need to share my screen. Can you permit me to do that?
Might want to mute that.
There we go. So I am going to be walking along here. Hopefully you all can see my presentation, and let me get through these introductory slides. But the first thing I want to touch on is how to use an attorney. When you're dealing with businesses, and the attorney-client relationship, has a lot of benefits to it. There's a lot of privileges associated with it. But when an attorney is working with a business and a business owner, you want to make sure you have identified, both the attorney and the client have identified where the who the client is, and whether it's the entity, the business owner, or the other business partners. So that's an initial issue that you and your attorney should review and discuss, but it's an important one to set the groundwork to move forward. Communication is extremely important. You want to have the that open communication. The attorney-client relationship is like any relationship, and the more the parties can communicate, the better. The attorney, understanding your business, the issues that are unique to your business will help you maximize the legal advice and representation you receive. When you're starting out, I would utilize your attorney as a referral source. You want to be mindful of, the other services that you need. There's, accounting, there's insurance, there's banking, all sorts of professional guidance that a business owner might need or require. And it's the kind of thing that you want to utilize your attorney, because that attorney in all likelihood is going to know others in those areas, perhaps, and help you out. And then, what I call the Goldilocks standard, you want to call your attorney and involve the attorney, not too early, not too late, but just that right time. But when that is, hopefully your attorney can guide you through that process. Calling your attorney to say, hey, John, I just signed this contract. That is definitely too late. The contract has been signed and there's not much to do at that point. So these are some things that are coming in when you're starting your business, things that you want to just tick off. The SBDC is certainly able to help you through this process. And these are some items to be mindful of. A business plan is helpful, maybe not just for your banker, but for yourself, to keep you mindful of what your business is. And it, as you get into your business, you'll find that things work or don't work, and it's going to evolve. And that business plan can be a living document and help you through that process. Choosing an entity we're going to talk about. I talked about the support team. The internet is so important these days. You want to see, what kind of domain names are available, and hopefully reserve that domain name early in the process to ensure that you have that ability to reach those out there virtually. What kind of business are you? A service or a general business? There's a link there to a New York State service or resource rather to walk through some of those professions. And if you are a professional service, like an attorney or a doctor, the entities, the business entities that you have available to you are, you need to be, there are certain restrictions and need to be able to, what is available to you. We'll talk through some tax issues. Certain businesses need particular licenses or permits, other, regulatory compliance issues. What those are, again, the New York State resources with respect to businesses are there to help you. You can also draw upon other business specific guidance that might be available to you. Let's see, employment matters. Is your business going to be such that there's going to be, are you going to have employees? Maybe the business owner himself or herself will be an employee, which you can do. Employment matters. What I'll say there is, in for a penny, in for a pound. And it's the kind of thing that as soon as you hire one person or two people, the compliance issues, payroll and all of that, it's kind of the same for 100 people, So as soon as you get to the point where you are hiring people, which is a good thing, just know that employment could create a lot of compliance issues that you certainly want to take the effort to comply with, because the ramifications can be severe. Now, if you are a sole owner of the business, a sole shareholder of a corporation, and you are paying yourself wages, you do have the ability to opt out of employment insurance. And that's a form reference that you would file to opt out of that. But I would coordinate with either your attorney or your accountant, or maybe even your payroll people to discuss that further. Let's see. Know your market. Whoops, sorry. And the issues that you have there. So with that, I want to just touch base with Melissa to see if there's any questions before I move on.
Okay, we don't have any questions, but we're having some issues with audio feedback. Some people are hearing just a buzzing, and I'm unsure. Someone suggested they think that it might be your PC speakers, or if you have a cell phone near them. Your
Yeah,
mic?
I muted my cell phone. I'll toss that aside. Let's see.
Can you switch your microphone? Is there a way to do that?
That might be above my technical capabilities. Sorry about that. I'll say that this is the kind of thing I haven't heard those kind of comments before, but
yeah, not everyone's getting the feedback,
Yeah.
so it might be a combination of things.
and I don't hear anything when you're talking.
Okay.
What I'm going to do, well, let's just soldier on. At the end of the program, I'm going to, copies of the PowerPoint will be made available. You can always contact me with questions. My contact information will be at the end of the PowerPoint. But let's just kind of
Okay.
soldier along.
A couple questions did pop in though.
Okay, sure.
Right when we okay. What was the website that you mentioned earlier? You're just asking.
Let's see. Well, there's a couple of websites. New York State, I'll just say it provides a lot of resources, and going to, the New York State website, Google and getting into, their business guidance resources, there's all kinds of things. Professional or general business determinations, that's there. With respect to walking through those professional services, licensing and permits. There's some general information here through Business Express. But what I would suggest is to utilize Google, utilize the New York State resources. Don't rely on private providers. Go to the state, and there's a lot of information there. And pick up the phone. There are people there at New York State that are there to help you and answer questions. Okay.
One more question.
Yeah.
What do you advise if you discover another name that mirrors your business name that was started about the same time?
Okay, so New York State will not form an entity, whether it's an LLC, corporation, or partnership, where the name is either the same or somewhat similar. So if you try to, form an entity, John's lawn mowing service, and there's another John lawn mowing service there, the state will bounce it back when you try to form that entity. So that alone will tell you whether, that name is available or not. So whether you use an attorney or, a LegalZoom or something like that, you want to try to find something unique. And, there is a business entity search feature at the New York Secretary of State that you're able to, do some searches and try to make the search broad. Don't, the proverbial analogy is flip on the overhead lights rather than searching the room with a flashlight. So try to make a broad search and see what's out there. But the entity name is a formal name and it's different from your trade name. So I can have, John Lazenby Holding Company, LLC, and that LLC can, do business as, John's Lawn Service, and that's okay. Now there might be, John's Lawn Service in Virginia or Iowa or something like that. That, New York's powers or governance powers to control the naming of entities ends at the border. So if there's confusion out of state, there's not much luck there. But, mowing lawns, I'm not going to be driving down to Virginia to mow a lawn. So there shouldn't be much in the way of confusion. But in terms of naming services, you want to see what's available. And then when it's time to form your entity to, just to go in there and get something. Okay. Gonna keep moving. Oh, something else, Melissa?
Yeah, considering some of the fees charged that attorneys charge, is it recommended that they either handle the registration on one's own or utilize a service such as LegalZoom?
Well, yeah, when you're forming a business, you want to be mindful of the money that you're spending. Working with an attorney is more expensive, but as an attorney, I think you get value for that. Where a LegalZoom, you're gonna get the entity formed certainly, but will it be done properly? And by that I mean, the supporting corporate governance actions that need to be taken, compliance with some of the regulatory oversight. If you're already operating a business as a DBA or a sole proprietorship and you're forming an entity, there's an action that there's assets that you're utilizing and they should be contributed into the LLC or corporation. And ideally that is something an attorney would handle. I don't think LegalZoom would walk you through that process. So I think, whether it's LegalZoom or, working through an attorney, the formation is just one startup consideration that you're looking at. And so that goes into your budgeting process and what kind of capital is going to be required to get your business up and running. And it's not just the money required to form it and start it, but to operate it for a particular period of time as you start to build business and clients and everything else. So, I think you working with an attorney, you're going to be paying more certainly, but in my opinion, I think you're going to get more value for that as well. But always talk with the attorney what they charge. And if you want to shop around, you should feel free to do that because different attorneys will charge differently.
Is that something that, sorry, my name is Carrie, and I had a friend who went through an accountant to help set up her LLC. Is that like a service accountants can provide too?
Technically, anybody could help you, point and click and get things filed. There's information there where folks are doing that. There might be some unique issues with respect to ownership or type of entity or, contributing assets and the like that the accountant may or may not be able to assist you with. You don't have to go too far before the accountant is going to be, stepping over the line and practicing law. And that's something that the accountant should not do. But, guiding and helping structure, an accountant can certainly do that. Okay.
Okay, we have a couple others, but in the essence of time, I'm just going to quickly read them. And then if you're going to cover them anyways, we'll just keep
Yep.
going.
Yep.
And first is, what's the difference between a trademark and a copyright? And can you trademark or copyright the name of a business?
We'll get to that.
Okay, that's coming up. I applied for an EIN and it was declined. Do I need to reapply as a sole owner?
We'll touch on that in a minute. Yep.
The LLC protects the name of the business statewide. What protects the name nationally? We already saw that one, I think. No, I didn't. I didn't repeat that one. Yeah, the LLC protects the name of the business statewide. What protects the name nationally?
And with that, I'll touch on that. Much of that is like intellectual property issues, trademark and copyright and the like. But a trade name is, anybody could use it nationwide, and the way to protect it nationwide is through a trademark or a service mark. Ultimately, that's registered with the U.S. government, U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And I'll at the end of the program is when I touch on intellectual property issues, we'll touch on that.
Okay. And lastly, once you go through the process of getting a small business started, are there any other annual fees besides taxes associated with keeping the business open?
There is a biannual statement registration requirement with a nominal fee. But if you miss that, that's not detrimental to the entity. You just are not in good standing. And, if you miss it for a period of time, you can always pay what you owe and get caught up. But you want to be, one thing I'll say with entity formations is you want to be very careful with private solicitations. Companies are out there to take your money, and some of them are pretty cagey, and they're going to make their notice look very official or government looking, that it came from New York. Read the fine print, and oftentimes, that's just a money grab by private companies to offer this service that you can handle on your own. If you're questioning something, circle back with your attorney. Is this real? And just be careful, because it's public record when you form your entity, and there's companies that search that and will issue, these solicitations that look official looking, but are really just money grabs. So buyer beware on that front. All right, when we're forming a business, sales tax is a big issue. If you need to collect it, then complying with the sales tax rules is extremely important. But not all businesses need to collect sales tax. So there's a New York State publication, that publication 750, that does a lot of good information. Basically, if you're selling something tangible, something that is you can touch and feel, the default is that there is sales tax on that, and you need to collect it and pay it over to the state, unless there's an exemption, like food, for instance. But and then the default is, with respect to services, then there is not any sales tax applied to that unless it's specifically included. So you want to know what your business is and what you're selling, and whether you need to collect sales tax. And you want to know that at the outset. And if you do need to collect sales tax, you got to get what's called a certificate of authority from the tax department issued to the business. And if you formed a separate entity, an LLC or a corporation, and you need to collect sales tax, it's the entity that's doing the business that needs to have the certificate of authority issued to it. So it's not to you. So I own, John's Mini Mart LLC, and it's John's Mini Mart LLC that's going to get the certificate of authority. It's not me personally. And when you collect sales tax from your customers, sales tax is known as a trust fund tax. So meaning you're collecting money, it's the government's money, and you're holding it on behalf of the government, either in the cash drawer or in the bank until you pay that tax over. So be very mindful of using that money for something else. So if you're on a schedule where you pay sales tax quarterly and you have to pay some vendor before then, don't be dipping into the sales tax money that you're holding for the state to pay that vendor, because as soon as those taxes are due, they need to be paid. And New York State, more so than income taxes, they're going to go after businesses and collect sales taxes. And you can see, headlines in the newspaper all the time about New York State shutting down various businesses because of sales tax problems. So coordinating with your bookkeeper or your accountant and making sure that those sales taxes are paid is extremely important. Okay, so we're gonna dive into choosing an entity. And before we talk about the separate entities themselves, these are some things that you want to think about as it relates to how we should decide. The biggest reason why folks form an entity is to provide some liability protection. An LLC and a corporation, they provide liability protection to the owner. The business liabilities are enclosed or encapsulated within the entity, and they don't flow through to you personally. So your house, your car, and your other personal assets aren't necessarily subject to the business liabilities. A DBA, a sole proprietorship, there is no liability protection. That's you doing business as yourself. So folks don't necessarily like that sometimes, and they're going to form an entity to do that. Income tax treatment, there's some income tax benefits to having an entity that you can write off certain expenses and deductions and the like, or maybe take advantage of some retirement plan benefits and the like. But your accountant may in fact recommend an entity because of income tax issues. Other factors that you want to consider when we're forming an entity, how many owners are there? Or is it just you? Are there others? What's the relationship amongst the owners? Is it you putting in the sweat equity, actually doing the work, and it's your rich uncle who's put in the money to finance that? Do you want ownership interests to be transferable? Do you want to bring in new owners over time? How much money are people going to be investing? Is the business capital intensive? Are there a lot of machines, equipment, assets that the business needs to buy in order to run the company or the business? Or is it something, simply a service that you're providing? You're tutoring students math. There really isn't much capital that needs to be invested to provide that kind of tutoring service. And do you have the money? Or do your fellow business partners have the money? Or does it need to be raised from others? And if you need money, you got to raise it from somebody else, there's basically one of two ways. You can sell an ownership interest in the business and raise the money through equity, or you can borrow the money from a bank or somebody else and you finance the business through debt. All of those considerations can fold into what kind of entity you form. Management structures, basically how are decisions going to be made? If it's just you, these issues go by the wayside pretty quickly versus, if there's others in the room, how are decisions going to be made? What happens if you can't decide on a particular issue? How are profits and losses going to be allocated? Again, if it's just you, as the 100% owner, that's a moot point. But if there's business owners, multiple business owners, that is a consideration, especially when you've got your rich uncle who put in the money. He may want to get paid first before you do, or before it gets shared. When you're starting out selling the business, that may not be as much of a consideration, but it's something you want to think about down the road. How are you going to, transfer the business? Is it to your kids? Is it to, the employees? Is it going to be, you're just going to sell it to some third-party buyer, hopefully? But all of that, needs to be considered at when you're forming the business. And then whatever you do decide to operate your business under, that entity can be changed. This isn't carved in granite, and you work through with an attorney to change that entity selection. That can be done. Okay, briefly, sole proprietorship. So this is just you. It's easy. It's an easy way to get in there, start conducting business, see if your business idea has legs, and whether there's going to be a viable business there. And because it's just you, it's tough there's no business to sell. There's only assets. You can't sell yourself. You can operate that business as a sole proprietorship under a trade name or a DBA, but when you file a DBA certificate with the county clerk, and that's where that's done, every county that you're operating business in, you need to, and you are going to utilize a DBA, you need to file a DBA certificate in each county. So be mindful of that. But that is just a nickname. There is no liability protection whatsoever. I've had people say, "Oh, John, I filed my DBA, so I'm good to go and I'm protected." No, that's still you doing business, and all your personal assets are subject to the liabilities of the business. Income taxes are pretty simple in the sense that you just file a Schedule C and attach it to your 1040 return. But keeping the books and maintaining bookkeeping is extremely important when it's time to file those taxes. The advantages, as I've touched on, it's very simple, easy. You've got full control of the business. It's just you, and you don't have to manage a business by committee or anything like that. But because it's just you are you can't hire yourself. So there's not an ability to pay wages. You've got to deal with self employment taxes and quarterly estimated taxes. Any losses that you have, though, can be offset against other wages that you might earn. So if you have your day job still, or your spouse is working and your business has a loss, those losses can offset that other W-2 income that you might be having. And disadvantages, as I said, no liability protection. You can't have a business partner because it's just you. As soon as you bring somebody in, you're going to be a deemed general partnership, which we'll talk about briefly. You can't really raise money from somebody else. The only way to bring money in is for somebody to give you a gift, because it's just you. There's no entity to invest in. And the business would end when you end. There's nothing to pass on to the next generation other than assets, which may be significant. And if you're really making money, the SALT cap, which is a limitation on federal income taxes, limiting it to $10,000, there are workarounds associated with that in New York State, but that is not available to you when you are a sole proprietorship. And if you have questions on that point, I would work with your accountant to discuss that further. Okay, we're into partnerships, and partnerships are basically two or more people, and they happen as soon as you start working with somebody. So that may or may, not be a good thing. If you're working, if you're a plumber and you're working with an electrician on a job, that's kind of okay in the sense that, you're doing your thing and the electrician's doing his thing. You're each going to get paid separately. You're not controlling or working together. But if you're, going from job to job and you present yourself as, John and Steve, electricians and plumbers, then you're verging into the area of a general partnership. And if you have a business partner, that's fine. They're good. More hands make light work, make light work, something like that. And if you have something with somebody else, I stress that you have a partnership agreement. Write down how decisions are going to be made, how profits are going to be allocated, how capital obligations are going to be shouldered, who does what. And don't worry about overly formalized partnership agreements. You can certainly get one with an attorney, but have something in writing, because if there is a dispute, you want to refer back to some written document to determine what it was that the original deal was. Because if you don't have an agreement, there are default rules under the statute in New York, and those statutory provisions may be different than what you and your business partner want. So I touched on what the partnership agreements will deal with. General partners, each partner has an equal voice and can bind the partnership. So if your business partner goes and buys a boat in the name of the partnership, the partnership bought a boat. There's nothing you can do or undo to affect that. If you have a partnership agreement, you can point to a provision in the agreement that major expenditures will be decided on jointly and not unilaterally. And then your business partner breached the contract, and then you would have an action for recourse under the contract, under the partnership agreement. But absent kind of other partnership entities, a general partnership is gonna terminate on death or when another partner withdraws. Partnership taxation, they are pass-through entities. Profits and losses flow through. So the partnership does not pay any income tax. Everything gets allocated and flows through to the owners. It's the kind of thing where if you don't take cash out of the business and you're reinvesting it into the business and it stays in the partnership, and the partnership did really well, there's a lot of profit, and that profit is going to be flow through to you, and you're going to pay tax on that, even though you didn't take any cash out. So, a pass-through entity like a partnership is the profits and losses flow through to you, and it doesn't necessarily follow the cash. That can be a confusing topic for folks when they don't really see that. If they don't take any cash, how can they be taxed on profit? I didn't take any money out. Well, it passes through to you, and that's how that works. You don't pay yourself wages, similar to the sole proprietorship. So you take draws, you're subject to self-employment taxes. The advantages of partnerships is you just need somebody else to operate the business, and boom, you're in. You can have a general partnership form right out of the box. There's really little formality that needs to be done. The disadvantages are just that, without a partnership agreement, especially, you have unlimited liability for the whole partnership. So if your business partner is making bad decisions, you're going to be on the hook for that. And so to be mindful of that. So as I mentioned, because partnerships, magically appear because of two people working together, this can be a consideration when you are working together with somebody and you want to avoid a partnership. Whoops. And these are steps that you can take. You want to be independent. You don't want to market yourselves as one business. So John and Steve's electricians and plumbers, I want to be separate and apart from the electrician, and you're going to bill your customers separately. You're going to have different rates, and you're going to be marketing yourself separately. You're not going to be doing it together or submitting one invoice or quoting one price. So you want to treat yourself separately, and how you treat yourself will then dictate how the law treats you. Let's see, Melissa, is there anything before I dive into corporations? I've been talking quite a bit. Are there questions?
Yes, there's a few questions, and I still say it justifies having a second webinar just called Ask a Lawyer. Okay, so starting from the top, we'll do what we did last time, where if you think you're going to cover it later, just say that and we'll continue.
Yep.
Okay, why does my tree service charge sales tax?
That is a service subject to sales tax. You dive into that, those materials provided by the tax department, and that's a specifically listed service. So yeah, capital improvements is generally the default rule.
Can you give an example of a service inclusion that would mean you had to collect sales tax?
Off the top of my head, well, like I know when contractors are coming to make improvements to your house, they're charging sales tax. And I think the rule is basically as a capital improvement to a home. But again, the service, you just need to go and look. Nothing comes off the top of my head. I haven't looked at those services in a while.
Relating to the certification of authority, can you explain the apply 1 month before the cycle by going in by the due date, and even if nothing was sold, to put 0 in? When does that start after the business is formed?
Yeah, so New York requires you to have the certificate of authority before you open the doors. And there might be some 0 returns where you have your certificate of authority and you're not open yet, and you're just, filing a 0 return. But as soon as, you start collecting sales tax and selling stuff, then you're ready to go and you're doing that. But the state, they want that certificate of authority there before you open, which may, equate to the fact that you're getting it, early and before you're actually doing any business.
Okay. Related to sales tax, if the parent and holding companies rest in the U.S. with goods sent to a subsidiary in a foreign jurisdiction, is or how sales tax are applied? Yeah.
So sales tax is a New York tax, and if you sell something to, and there's all kinds of exemptions or exceptions for sales tax. So if I sell something to a subsidiary, there's no beneficial change in ownership there, and you don't need to necessarily collect sales tax on that. If you sell something to a customer, out of state in Maryland, then the sales tax is the point, the final destination. So you shouldn't have to collect sales tax and pay sales tax in New York for sales that were made in Maryland. Now, do you need to collect and pay sales tax in Maryland? The default is yes, but if you're if that was a one-off sale, you're really not going to be in Maryland again. I might not go through the process of registering and paying sales tax in Maryland for, one particular transaction. But if you find yourself suddenly selling a lot in Maryland, I would go through the process and collect and sell tax to pay sales tax in Maryland. But the default is sales tax is a destination wherever the sale is made, to the extent an exception or exemption isn't applicable.
Okay, I'm going to jump to the bottom because there's a couple questions to tag on to the topic, which is, does sales tax apply to online businesses?
The short answer is yes. And then the question is, is there an exemption? If you're an online business and you're making sales to people in New York State, definitely you need to pay sales tax.
And what if you sell online and the host website collects sales tax?
Well, then you've contracted, with some other entity to do that, and you just want to make sure that they are complying, whether there's reporting back to you or anything like that. But you just want to be careful that, that they're actually not just collecting sales tax, but paying it to the state. And if it's the kind of thing where you or your business has a certificate of authority and it's your business that's obligated to pay the sales tax and you're relying on somebody else to pay it, well, if they don't pay it, you're still on the hook, even though the money was collected and paid, somewhere else. So just be very careful on that kind of dynamic and, just check and audit as much as you can.
Okay, we have a passionate question of what is the cost for a certificate of authority?
$0. Certificate of authorities need to be obtained online through the New York State Tax Department, and they're going to give them away. That means hopefully people are paying taxes and the state likes that.
Okay. What is the March, June, September, December as it relates to sales tax services?
In terms of your filing frequency for sales tax is dictated by the amount of sales that you have. And in coordinating and reviewing those rules with the tax department, or on their tax department website will help you on that. But sales tax returns need to be filed electronically through the state. And again, if you're collecting a lot of money, that's going to mean you're going to be filing sales taxes and paying sales taxes more frequently versus, somebody with not a lot of revenues. So just coordinate with and understand what those rules are through the state tax department.
For an online business, is the sales tax charged based on the state you do business in?
Correct, yes. And even in New York State, different counties have different tax rates. So the sales tax you pay here locally consists of two components. There's the state tax and the county tax. State tax is 4%, county tax is 4%, boom, 8% sales tax. But the state is going to be the same across the state, but different counties will have different rates. So you want to check and see what county it is that you're in and are making the sale, and then do the withholding or charging the sales tax appropriately.
How does one convert an existing sole proprietorship DBA to an LLC?
You form the LLC, and then the business, as a sole proprietorship, you just have assets. So those assets need to be contributed into the LLC. Is really the short answer. Now, how you do that, that's something to make sure it's done properly. I would suggest you coordinate with an attorney to facilitate that. But, you're operating your sole proprietorship over here, it's moving and shaking, and then you have your LLC over here, you need to get it into the LLC. And that, anything that is done with the sole proprietorship, insurance, that's going to be in your name. Now the LLC needs to be the insured. Bank accounts, they need to be registered out of your name and into the LLC's name. Anything and everything that, you got to have the LLC be the operator. And that just takes, either working with an attorney or just kind of going through all that.
Once you have legally structured your business and your permits and licenses are in order, do you have any advice on leasing property?
Well, you can lease property, office space, equipment, any kind of lease, and automobiles. And, the general default is now that you have your entity, it's the entity doing the business, and it's then the entity that needs to be the tenant on the lease. So don't sign, a lease personally in your own name when you think you have this LLC here. It's the LLC that needs to be the tenant. It's the LLC that signs the contract. But yeah, you can go LLCs, corporations, they can all enter into leases.
If you applied for and received your LLC, do you need to apply for a DBA?
Maybe. If you are going to do business under the formal name of your LLC, then you don't need a DBA. It is, Lazenby's Computers LLC, and you can operate that business as Lazenby Computers LLC. But if I wanted Lazenby Computers LLC to do business as, Mr. Computer Fix-It, then the LLC needs to file what's called an assumed name certificate in Albany, and that is applicable to each county you are doing business in. So if you're doing business statewide, there's an election to have the assumed name for the LLC be done statewide. But if you're just in Monroe County, for instance, you can have it applicable just in that county. But yeah, there is a way to do that, coordinating either with an attorney or trying to poke around it yourself through the Secretary of State's website is the way to do that.
Okay, we had a couple questions that were answered by other participants, so I will also read their answer if there's anything you want to add to it. Can you apply for a small business loan using your LLC versus using personal credentials? And that was answered by Melissa Jordan with, yes, you could apply through your LLC.
Yeah, I'll just add that, any kind of, liability protection or entering, the LLC entering into a contract, a lease to rent office space or borrowing money from a bank, it's likely that you have your LLC, but then the party on the other side of that contract, the bank loan, a lease, is going to want some personal, having some personal guarantee or personal security. So all of those liability protections kind of poof go out the window as soon as you sign a personal guarantee, because you are personally and all your personal assets guaranteeing the performance of your LLC under a lease or under a bank loan. So just be mindful of that.
Okay, the questions keep rolling in. Every time I think we only have 10 questions left, it keeps staying at 10. So I don't know if you want to cut off at some point, and we could
I'm going to keep rolling here. I'm going to work through our discussion on various entities, and then Melissa, I'll circle back with you at the end of that before we go on to the next section.
Okay.
All right. So corporations, that's a kind of entity that we can form, and, small business owners with just one owner, just yourself, can form a corporation, and that corporation is the same as IBM and General Electric and Ford Motor. Except it's, Lazenby Computer Inc. And so all of the benefits of a corporation can be enjoyed by you as the sole, owner of a corporation. Profits are distributed out to the shareholders through dividends. Corporations can choose to be treated as a pass-through entity for income tax purposes by making what's called an S election. And you've got different, hats, what I'll say. People wear different hats. You've got the shareholders that own the corporation. Shareholders appoint a board of directors to oversee the running of the business by the corporation and look after the shareholders' interest, their ownership interests. The board of directors then hire executive officers, presidents, treasurer, secretary, to kind of oversee and be responsible for the day-to-day operations of the business. And then those officers will in turn hire the employees that are actually doing the work. So you've got all of these different responsibilities: shareholder as owner, director as a fiduciary looking after the shareholders' interests and kind of being in between the shareholder and the corporation itself, officers that are running and overseeing the day-to-day operations. Now, you as a sole proprietorship, single member, single owner, you can form a corporation and you can do all of those things yourself. You can be the sole shareholder owning 100% of the common stock of the company. You can be then appoint yourself the sole director. And then that you as the director can appoint yourself as the president, CEO, treasurer, secretary of the corporation. And then you can hire yourself, pay yourself wages, and you can mop the floor. So you can be all of those different things as yourself. And it's just being mindful of what hat you're wearing. And those formalities and operating and administering a corporation, it's those respecting and adhering those corporate formalities, even if it's just you on each of those different levels, then that's where the law will respect that entity as well. If you respect the separateness of the corporation, the law will respect the separateness of the corporation, and you will have that liability protection that, hopefully is something that you want, and it's one reason why you formed the corporation in the first place. As soon as you have more than one shareholder, however, again, there's more cooks in the kitchen, and we need to be mindful of having an agreement amongst the shareholders to ensure that you're all on the same page. And, maybe it's an agreement of who the board of directors will be. You want to make sure that your fellow owner does not appoint, that crazy uncle to the board. So you have an agreement restricting who is going to be on the board or things like that. Taxation, you have a choice. Corporations can be C corps or S corps. And a C corp means the corporation is filing and paying income taxes. And then if there's excess profits, when they pay a dividend to you, you're going to pay income tax on that dividend. So that's that double taxation that you may have heard about with respect to C corps. A way to alleviate that is by making an S election and being taxed as an S corp, in which case it's a pass-through entity and everything flows through to you. There's a lot of benefits, tax benefits with respect to losses being carried forward or carrying back to prior years. Deductions could be made, all sorts. You can pay yourself wages. You can pay yourself an employee as an employee, and those wages you pay yourself are deductible and offset the profits of the company. So all kinds of benefits. If you do elect to be taxed as an S corporation, however, there's some restrictions as to the ownership and the capital structure of the corporation as to whether that entity is eligible to make that election. You need to have only one class of stock. So it has to be common stock. You can't have preferred stock. You can't have foreign shareholders. So if you're doing business with your friendly Canadian, they can't be a shareholder, or if they are, you're stuck in as a C corp. All sorts of other aspects, but to be mindful of. But the benefits of a corporation, again, primarily liability protection. Corporations have been around for generations, and raising money in the corporate form is standard, I should say, or people are used to it. There are shares that, well, I'm sorry. Well, there are shares that can be sold, and all sorts of different classes: preferred stock, common stock, multiple classes of preferred stock. So if that rich uncle needs to be paid first, you have the ability to give him preferred shares, which would then enable him to get paid first. Disadvantages: that the double tax can be something. That formality is such that it can be inhibiting. It's not as easy or flexible in terms of structuring yourself. The corporate structure is pretty formal and set, even though you do have a lot of ways to structure the capital structure. In terms of operations, you're limited to a certain extent, and that formality needs to be adhered to. The LLC is something that I see quite a bit with small business owners, and it's a hybrid. Basically it's the in between a partnership and a corporation. So it acts and behaves very similar to a partnership, but it has the liability protection of corporations. And unlike a partnership, you can have one person own an LLC. You can have a single member LLC and operate that business under the LLC and have that liability protection. But for income tax purposes, a single member LLC is disregarded. So from the IRS's perspective, it's as if you are a sole proprietorship. So it's very simple, very easy. If you have multiple owners of an LLC, having an operating agreement is extremely important, just like having a partnership agreement. But LLCs have that flexibility to be taxed, or allocate profits or do whatever, so long as there's economic substance supporting that. The default is for LLCs to be taxed as partnerships, but they do have the ability to make an election to be taxed as a corporation. So sometimes you will see LLCs make an election to be taxed as an S corp, which would enable them to still have pass-through status, but the owner has the ability to pay herself wages, and oftentimes business owners like paying themselves wages because there's income tax withheld. They don't have to deal with quarterly estimated taxes, and it just gives them some comfort in that sense. And you can do that through an LLC, even a single member LLC. But the default is for partnerships. And again, if you are a single member LLC, you will only be taxed on your Schedule C. It's a disregarded entity. but it is a real entity for legal purposes. So the LLC can enter into contracts. It's the LLC that can borrow money. It's the LLC that can open a bank account. I've talked about much of this. I'm going to skip ahead here. Forming an LLC in New York State, there are some administrative actions that need to be done. It can be a little bit more expensive than forming a corporation. There's legal notices that need to be filed or issued in newspapers. It's a weird New York thing. But all of that can lend itself to be a little bit more expensive on the formation side. But working with an attorney is a good reason to do that, to help you guide you through that process. When you guys download this PowerPoint, this section is, kind of some of the things. Well, what's the right entity for me? Sole proprietorship, LLC, corporation? The answer is it depends. And so these questions and answers, I try to present that to you to walk you through some of those concerns in that sense. So before we continue on, that kind of closes the various entities options that you have here. And so let me turn it to Melissa. Any questions that people might have?
Okay, we have 16 questions, including the ones that we just didn't get to last time. And I apologize if some of the later questions are things you covered, because I've been monitoring the chat and I haven't been able to pay attention as much.
Yeah.
So, okay. Will sales tax need to be collected if I do consultant work and collect a flat rate?
That depends. Consulting is generally not taxable, but it might be. So I would defer you to the materials the tax department has on services and taxable services subject to sales tax.
I have another one that was answered by a different participant, but I'll do it like last time. If I'm hosting an event and charge vendors a flat booth rate, do I need to collect the sales tax on top of the flat rate from them? And it was answered by Andrew. Depends on what you do. Interior design is considered a service subject to sales tax in New York State, as is agriculture lighting design. Others are not.
Yep, good answer. The fact, I should add, whether you're charging by the hour or a flat rate, that doesn't matter. Whatever you're charging, that's going to be subject to sales tax. So, it's whatever the total is. What does the customer owe you to pay for your service? And that's the number that gets applied to the sales tax, that gets tacked on top of that.
Are there standard contracts or specific contracts? Is there specific language for a specific contract?
Well, no. I would say every contract, you can buy stuff off the rack, right? And the suit may not fit very well, but it does the job. Versus something that's specifically tailored, that truly fits you and provides the needs that you have. So contracts, very similar. You want to be very careful of downloading a form contract off the internet or having some form contract given to you by an attorney and it doesn't fit your situation. So reading the contract, understanding the contract is extremely important. Considering how it relates to your business, does it provide, the need that you have? And as an attorney, I think every contract provides certain, aspects, and I'll talk about contracts a little bit later. But just make sure that it applies and satisfies the issues that you have with respect to whatever you're trying to contract for.
I want to ensure I set up my business properly, so I want to meet with an attorney. When looking for one, what specialty or focus should the attorney have?
You would want to work with a corporate general business lawyer, somebody who operates, within the corporate general business area. You might look at a M&A transactional attorney, but general business corporate is what you're looking for.
I have a C Corp. We are developing a software product and have no income at this point, yet our annual income tax is $800. Why is that?
That's a good question. I would defer that to the accountant. I mean, if you don't have income, you don't have revenues, I'm kind of curious as to where the $800 tax is coming from. So that doesn't seem to make sense, but I would ask your accountant.
This might be an odd question, but can you amend a business tax return? If you start your LLC in a previous year, but did not fulfill all requirements until the following year, can I go back and claim on the previous year?
Short answer is yes. Tax returns can be amended, and you have that ability. Working with your accountant, you can facilitate that.
Isn't New York State sales tax a destination tax? So New York State tax is charged on country product is received, not shipped. Does that make sense?
Yep, I would generally agree with that.
If I sell an item online in all 50 states, do I have to apply the appropriate tax for each state I sell to?
And I had talked about that. If it's a one-off, sale to somebody in Idaho, and you're not really doing much of that, I wouldn't worry about it too much. But if you're repeatedly making sales to somebody in Pennsylvania or multiple people in Pennsylvania, then I would go through the process of registering in that particular state.
If there is an established LLC, can a nonprofit be under the LLC umbrella? Or does a separate nonprofit need to be created for a 501c3?
Not-for-profit corporations are generally don't have owners. So, there is no such thing as a subsidiary not-for-profit. Now, that said, you do have not-for-profits can have members and you can have ownership there, but it requires some really careful planning and corporate structure work that you would certainly want to work with an attorney on.
Do you recommend a CPA for taxes, or can you use a program like TurboTax to track taxes?
Either. If you're detail oriented and understand the ins and outs and can follow along, TurboTax is fine. But if you need a little bit more or a lot more hand holding and service and just working with a live person, working with a local CPA is certainly reasonable too. So I would defer to your comfort level, but yeah.
I keep hearing if you are an LLC, you should file taxes as an S Corp. Can you speak to this?
Well, again, I think it depends on your particular situation. People like corporations if they want to pay themselves wages, and you're really what you're dealing with is S Corp treatment, pass-through treatment versus a single member LLC filing as a sole proprietorship on a Schedule C. There's no right way or wrong way. I think it's some of the aspects or benefits that S Corps provide versus single member LLCs and vice versa. So it really depends on your particular situation. Work with your accountant, ask questions.
Do we need sales tax authority for individual states? I think we already answered that one. Unless you are restricted then the way to go is to select S group. Why would anyone want to be subject to double taxation?
Well, that's a good question. As a small business, you really wouldn't. There are situations where C corps are desirable, but you're at a higher level of planning there. So for purposes of small businesses, close to the held business operations, I really don't see the need for a C corp, but they might be out there.
Under an S election, it shows that shareholders that are employees remain subject to employment and withhold taxes on earnings. Is that just wages and not P&L monies?
Correct. Yep. So if you pay yourself $100 in wages and there is, revenue of $200 and there's overhead of $50, there's, another $50 of profit that you can pass on to yourself, but you're only paying in, income withhold, I should say employment taxes or income withholding taxes on the 100 W-2 wages you pay yourself.
Is the operating agreement the same as a business plan?
No, an operating agreement is an agreement that is all encompassing, that deals with an agreement amongst the owners of an LLC and determines how decisions are made, how profits are allocated, how transferable will ownership interests be, how profits and losses are done, how is the management structure going to be addressed. A business plan is just this is the business we're in. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. This is the philosophy that we're going to have. So it's more flowery type language, and it's not legally binding at all. It's just your North Star, so to speak, as you're running the business, versus an operating agreement, which is a binding contract that you have with your other business owners. Good question.
Can you explain 8 question B means in more detail?
8B, what? Well, let's skip that one. And if it's not addressed, hopefully they'll ask again to clarify.
Okay. So individual LLC files Schedule C, but if you have more than one member, you file S Corp or C Corp?
The more than one member, there are partnership returns, and I forget the IRS form. It's like 25, 42, 24, 52. I forget. But there's a partnership return. There's no taxes paid on that return. And each partner receives what's called a Form K-1. And that reports all of the attributes that the partnership had for the year. So it'll pass through profits, losses. It'll report your capital account balances and things like that. So think of a K-1 as the W-2 for partners. And that's from the K-1 information that you take and report on your 1040 return.
Okay, going back to the previous one for clarification, 8B was heading 8 question B. So it's Roman numeral 8. Back
okay.
a few slides.
Let's see. Here we go. Will owners have different rights to capital profits or distributions? And if the answer is yes, meaning the example I've used here is the rich uncle and you doing the work. So if the rich uncle buys the lawnmower and you're out there cutting the grass, the rich uncle might want to get his money back first before you start getting paid, on the profits of the lawn mowing business. And if that's the case, you might want to, form an LLC which has that flexibility, or a C Corp, which can have different classes of stock. Remember, an S Corp has to have a single class of stock, all common stock, and everything has to go pro rata on common stock. So you don't have that flexibility to do that.
I want to write books that may be sold worldly. Not sure when I would need an attorney from the start or once it gets to that point.
Probably, whatever contract you have with your publisher that's the contract that's going to govern how you're going to get paid and whose rights are allocated to which party, publisher or author. And that's an agreement that's pretty important, and you would want to work with an attorney on. So I would say whatever contract the publisher issues you when it's time to go to print.
Are capital investments taxable? That is to say, the subsidiary foreign jurisdiction takes a loan for investment, but transfers the funds to the parent company in New York.
Your income, you're going to be taxed on worldwide income, and it's a question of foreign activities are, deductible or offset the activity within the U.S. And when you repatriate profits, that could be an event that's subject to tax. But, when you're dealing with foreign subsidiaries, that's where you're going to certainly want to be coordinating and working with your accountant.
If I have customers outside of the country, do I have to pay taxes in the USA or the country where the customer is?
Yes, with the caveat of you get a credit domestically for foreign taxes paid. So if you paid taxes in Australia, you get a deduction for those taxes you paid in Australia on your US return. So you're not going to get paid, you're not going to get hit with a double tax on the same profit in both Australia and the US. Hopefully. There's tax treaties that various countries have with each other to govern that, but the spirit is you're not going to get double taxed.
How do you go about selecting and vetting a good CPA? Is there a good checklist to go through?
You want to make sure the accountant is a good listener. You have a good, feel for it, reputation, recommendations, types of businesses. If you own a restaurant and this accountant deals with a lot of restaurants, that's a good indicator. You want an accountant that knows your business and your market. And I would just, you're not hiring the accountant as an employee, but you are in essence hiring that person. So you want to go through a vetting process and make sure you're comfortable with that person.
I am thinking of doing speech therapy online as a business. Do I need a Pllc?
Probably. The fact that the services are conducted online doesn't negate the professional aspect of that. So speech therapy, I believe, is one of those professional services that have to have a professional entity formed. I would check that to make sure. But yeah, having it online does not negate that necessity.
Do you have a guesstimation of what I can expect to pay an attorney to properly set up the necessary legal documents? Are we talking hundreds or thousands?
Well, to form an entity in New York or other states, there's filing fees and other costs that are just unavoidable because they're charged by the government, really. And those are hundreds of dollars. And then the attorney generally will charge a fee on top of that, which in all likelihood is going to be hundreds. So you add hundreds together and you might still be in the hundreds, or you might be, into 1,000 or so. But the attorney should be able to answer that question.
Are there different considerations for a service business like dog training if they're local, online, or a combination?
I wouldn't, no, I think that, again, online or in person, brick and mortar, all of the various, you're still conducting business. It's just the medium in which you're doing it. So the legal considerations, I would say, are all the same, whether it's online or in person.
I changed the name of my business. Do I obtain a new IEN or change the name on my EIN?
I would say the latter. If you just have a name change, the entity is the same. That hasn't changed. It's just the name. So you keep the same EIN and just change the name. And that's done with a name change filed with the IRS in New York State.
When having meetings to pitch my business services to a potential customer, what should I have handy legally?
Well, contracts or, other proposals perhaps, but make sure, what you want is outlined. Maybe preparing questions ahead of time and just being organized, I would say.
We're down to two.
All right.
We're down to two questions. Do you recommend a company for liability insurance or do they depend on your service?
No, I would definitely, don't rely on merely the entity providing liability protection. You certainly want insurance. And when you're buying insurance, don't rely necessarily on a captive insurance agent, meaning, like a State Farm person. Nothing wrong with State Farm, certainly, but a State Farm agent or a captive agent can only sell one insurance company's product. And you want an independent agent that can shop around multiple insurance companies to ensure that, the insurance product you're buying is appropriate. But yeah, you definitely want insurance on top of your entity to protect yourself.
Okay, last question. What are your views on using H&R Block?
They're fine. I think when you're conducting business and you want to keep really good books and records, and the better you're keeping books and records, the more efficient you're going to be with your tax preparer. But there's capabilities out there. People know, and can help you. And again, it's another relationship, just like attorney-client relationship on the legal front. That accountant business owner relationship is equally important. Okay, I know technically this ends at 11:30. Am I right on that, Melissa?
Yes.
Okay, and it's 11:30. So I'm just going to quickly go along. Aside from forming and creating a business, you can buy a business. And all I'm going to say on that is that transaction is a major, major transaction. And you certainly want to engage an attorney on that front, because it's somebody that it's a unique specialty, and you want someone who knows what they're doing. You're going to be looking for an M&A attorney or a mergers and acquisitions attorney, and someone that's experienced on that. But buying a business is certainly viable. You want to do your due diligence and make sure you know what you're buying. There's all kinds of contracts. Business is really run on contracts. So like anything, I want you to just be mindful of reading the contract, make sure you understand the contract. And if you're giving the contract, it's your contract for your business service, make sure it reflects, what it is that you want, when you get paid, what happens if you don't get paid, what products or services are you providing, have it be as extremely specific as possible, and coordinate with your attorney to draft that contract appropriately. If you're signing the contract, don't sign it before you understand what it says. Does it reflect the terms of the agreement that you have? And if you have questions or don't like something, either circle up with your attorney or negotiate terms with yourself. You know, you have negotiating power. The other party wants to do business with you. So don't forget that, and work with your attorney. Enforcing contracts, you know, having a contract is great, but enforcement is huge. And without the enforcement, well, then it's just words on a piece of paper. How that is done can take legwork. Oftentimes it might be just a lot of internet searching and whatnot, but you want to enforce the terms of a contract, not just have it out there. Here are some examples of various contracts. And then lastly, intellectual property. I said I would touch on that. You know, trademarks is something where you're trademarking a word, phrase, symbol. That is where you can protect your business name by registering a trademark. And that trademark, a registered trademark through Patent and Trademark Office, is good nationwide, whether you're doing business in that part of the country or not. So even though you're here in the Northeast and you register a trademark nationally, it's good and protected in New Mexico. So that may be important to you, and especially in this day and age with internet and searching, and everyone's everywhere instantaneously, having that national protection is not a bad idea. But again, enforcement. So having the nationally registered trademark is great, but if you're not out there enforcing that mark, then, you know, how, if someone's operating under Lazenby Lawn Service in New Mexico, then they can continue doing it unless I send them a cease and desist letter. So enforcement of a national mark is just as important as actually getting it. A service mark is the same as a trademark, except it's the identifying the service look and feel. In the example I provide there is the painting of the plane's tail fin. Maybe it's the uniform of employees, things like that. A trade name is just that. It's a nickname for the business. We've touched on that previously. You have the ability to copyright, and again, copyrights protect the written word. So if you can see here, I've copyrighted this presentation, this PowerPoint. Now I haven't registered that. You do have the ability to register a copyright, but simply putting people on notice that this is yours, and that the date that it's applicable helps protect your creation, your written word. And the flip side of that, again, is enforcement and ensuring that, okay, how do I enforce this? Well, you hopefully rely on the notice that people see, and leave it at that. Now, domain names, I'll simply say, are not subject to copyright protection. So your domain name and all domains are administered by a separate organization. And so if I run a travel agency, for instance, I have the ability to put links to, disneyworld.com or disney.com or, American Airlines and the like. And I'm not violating any rights, copyrights that Disney or American Airlines might have, because domain names are not protected. All right, so I got to the end. This is my contact information. You can reach me here at my law firm, Kamen Burlove. Melissa, I'll just, any final questions, and then I'll let you coordinate with folks about getting copies of the PowerPoint out to them.
Okay, we actually have one question. So copyright should be done as soon as you have an idea for art, an idea versus finished product.
Well, copyrights can only only apply to something that's on paper. So if I have an idea for something, I can't copyright the idea. It has to be created, put down on paper, and then I can copyright it.
And it doesn't have to be paper, it just has to be a medium.
Yes, yeah, websites, yeah, thank you.
That was the last question we had. So that concludes this month's Business First Wednesday. And I'd like to thank John and Tim for presenting, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you all. Good luck.